Welcome to Conversations with My Real Friends. I'm Jennifer. I'm joined by Carl Lindner of Assessment Counseling Services. Today we're going to be talking about death and taxes.
Always certain.
The only things that are certain, according to Benjamin Franklin, are death and taxes.
That's correct.
Right? So from a reassessment standpoint, is death a triggering event for reassessment?
Yes, especially if you have a married couple, the second death of the surviving spouse is the triggering event.
Right. So, but even when one of them dies, it's a triggering event, but it's exempt.
Correct.
Correct? Yeah. But you got to still file the paperwork.
Always have to file the paperwork.
The assessors love their paperwork.
They do.
And if we don't give it to them, there's issues.
Yes,
correct?
They will always default to reassessing.
Correct.
Until you correct them.
And sometimes there's timing on this stuff, right? If we don't file paperwork within a certain time, that can avoid your ability to file for an exemption in some circumstances, right?
That's correct. For the new Prop 19, where you have to live in the same home as your parents, you have to file the homeowner's exemption form within 1 year, which is confusing because the actual claim form doesn't have to be filed for 3 years. And a lot of people get that confused. Correct.
So they have to move in and file the exemption of it being their home within a year.
Yes.
And then they have to apply for the reassessment potentially later, right? So in the event of a death, there's a form that the assessor wants you to fill out. What's it called?
It's called the Change in Ownership Statement, Death of Real Property Owner.
Perfect.
It's pretty clear about what it's there for.
That's pretty clear, right? And what's the timing on filing that form?
So you have 150 days to file this form after the death of your parent, most likely.
But so it's not a deed, right? It's
not
a transfer of title. It's a notice to the assessor.
It's a notice so they can send you a bigger tax bill.
Well, there is that. But it's important because if you don't do it, right? So, for example, I had a real situation where a client's father passed away. It was a large apartment building that Dad had owned. He kept it in the trust for several years and then sold it and had never notified the assessor.
Yeah.
The tax bills were several $100,000 in reassessment that came back.
Yeah.
Right? So how could he have avoided that?
Well, he could have filed it timely because once you file the form with the assessor within the 150 days, most of the time, if they're not fully backlogged on their work, it's an impetus for them to start reassessing. And they'll reassess quicker, which means you have less back taxes. And they can go back, if you have a death of someone, they can go back 8 years.
Oh, they can go back 8 years and reassess.
Correct.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Right?
Yes.
Well, and in this particular example, this was before Prop 19, and it was a parent-child transfer. He would have been exempt.
Correct.
From those taxes completely.
That's right.
But because he didn't file timely, he couldn't go backwards.
Yeah, it's never good. For the old rules, you used to have to file within 3 years of the death.
So, very important because sometimes people haven't done the paperwork and they have a situation where it was prior to the Prop 19.
Yes.
If they're dealing with those situations, either side of it, and need some help, how can they reach out to you?
Great. So we can be reached at acstax.com, or you can send us an email about your situation at info@acstax.com.
Great. Thanks, Carl, for joining me.
Absolutely.
And thank you. We appreciate your time.